All right, Isaac Harris. Mark Cuban took to Twitter, a useless platform, when he wanted to talk about what was happening with the Dallas Mavericks. He first started with talking about the three-point shooting. He said, so I was curious to compare three-point shooting this year versus last year. So he took to Basketball Reference. He knows how to use it. For the top 20 three-point attempts this season, I'm thinking he's doing for players. For players this year. The top 20 three-point attempts last year, 38.6% from the top three-point a game shooters last year. This year, 35%. So the highest volume three-point percentage shooters this year are shooting 3.5 percentage points worse than they were last year. He said the crazy thing is this year, 11 of the 20, so 11 of the top 20 volume three-point shooters are under 35% from three. That's bad. That's below average. And if you're shooting a ton of them, that's really bad. Last year, only 2 players were shooting below average in those players that were the top, highest shooting three-point shooters. And one is above 40% this year. So he goes on to that, and he talks about how if you go to the top 50 of three-point shooters, last year only 1 player shot under 34%. This year, 17 players are shooting under 34%. His whole point was just that three-point shooting is down. We've said that. He's just putting numbers to it. And he said, he ended that by saying, I think we are still adjusting to the new ball. We've thrown around this new ball thing every once in a while. Isaac, what's your take on the new ball?
Well, it's definitely affecting people. I don't think you can deny that. Like, shooting across the board is down, but I think it's down for a handful of reasons. And, him and Bob went back and forth on Twitter, which just gave, everybody was the meme of the guy kicking back, throwing, with a bucket of popcorn. It's like, let's see where this thing goes. And exactly that right there, if you watch on YouTube. But everybody has their different opinions, though, and no one knows. Like, this is an age-old argument here, but like, everybody has different opinion on something that you don't know the exact right answer to. For instance, we've heard Bob on another podcast give his whole spiel on it. He thinks a lot of it has to do with fans being back in the arena. That's why three-point percentages are down across the league. Mark obviously has, thinks a lot has to do with the ball and how it's affecting different shooters and stuff. Even, their big exchange came off a Bob Twitter, a Bob tweet today. Basically,
this is Bob is Bob Bulgaris. He was the former analytics guy that Cuban brought in and hired, and then was the guy that Luka screamed at in that game that became a whole thing, and then Rick Carlisle and lineups and all that kind of stuff. If you remember Bob Bulgaris, that's Bob.
Yeah, so Bob he likes to tweet about negative Mav stuff, and you understand that. And so he tweeted out, Bob saying on Twitter, Mavs, for instance, are largely getting different types of threes than they have in years past. If your main role in offense was historically to stand beyond the three-point line and take corner, catch and shoot threes, and now you're cutting screen. So he's obviously talking about Bullock in this, of saying, hey, I think it looks like he's saying, it looks like Bullock's shooting percentage is down because his roles change. He's not just a catch and shoot three-point shooter. Now he's moving, cutting, and doing all this stuff. And that's where Mark Cuban came in and was like, all right, well, we track stuff in practice and all this thing, catch and shoot in practice. And it's huge back and forth. It just goes to show you, everybody has their opinion on why shooting's down this year.
No one knows. No one knows for sure.
And there's no way to prove it, right? I get hey, let's just empty the arenas and keep this, new ball, or
so Mark Cuban's response was just that, basically. He said, we track shooting when guys are by themselves in the gym, right? We have those numbers, right? This year, prior years, and there are never any fans in the gym when they're shooting. You remember that, right? It's like, okay, how many times can he say right question mark in a tweet? But yeah, he says that they do track the numbers when guys are at practice and there's no fans in there. And I'm assuming that he's saying that the numbers are down there as well. And so that's another point in his direction of saying, well, it's the ball. The ball is different. Reggie Bullock, we mentioned earlier, Reggie Bullock was asked about the ball and said, yeah, it was an adjustment. He admitted that it was an adjustment for him. He'd been shooting that same ball, I think he said, for 8 years, which is probably his NBA career before, he was playing at North Carolina.
Yeah. So it's just, I laughed about it when I seen that back and forth, because obviously Mark leans towards that. And even Mark said on Twitter, he's like, hey, it's going to affect, and this isn't groundbreaking science either. It's going to affect different players different, right? Like there's some players, I mean, if we're going to the smaller scales here, if some of you listening play ball in high school, or you played some pickup ball, and there's some guys that you're going to play pickup ball with, and you're going to get the ball that like no one wants to play with on the outdoor court, that has no grip, that's super slick, but it's the only ball out there that you can play with. And you're like, either we're not playing at all and we're just packing up, rolling out to Taco Bell, or we're going to get some run in. There's still some guys out there that are going to actually play really well, because it doesn't matter. There's some of their shots, it doesn't matter. Like they can do that. But there's some guys like me, I can't shoot worth crap if there's no grip on the ball, just how like my form is and all this stuff. But there's some guys who can shoot it no matter what.
You and Reggie Bullock both.
No, so it's just, I know that's a dumb small example, but it's going to affect some players differently, but it's the same for everybody. My whole thing with like kind of what Mark's going for is, well, the ball's changed for everyone, shooting's down across the board, but we're like one of the worst of the worst. So like there's not a Mavs thing in this of, well, this is why the Mavericks are struggling shooting. Well, everybody's struggling, but you're still one of the worst of everyone struggling right now.
If the Mavs stayed their same rank in the NBA in 3-point shooting, then you would say, okay, so their percentage is down, but the rest of the league is down. But it's not the proportionate percentage that's down for the Mavs, it's down for the rest of the league, right? The Mavs are shooting worse than most of the other teams are shooting worse than they were last year. That makes sense if I said that sentence right. So then Reliably brings that point up, and then Mark Cuban says, our favorite quote of the exchange, I think, which is,
play a game of basketball first, then we can talk.
He said, play a game of basketball first, then we can talk. Talks about the impact of different balls and all that kind of stuff. And then the quote that's being talked about the most, which I think is the probably the least relevant, but we'll bring it up. He talks about how people, Mark Cuban had a bunch of fans come in, and obviously they were angry. This was after the Nets loss, and fans were down bad. They were upset. A lot of people blame Mark Cuban because of his decision-making. And he said, talks about how NBA Twitter is toxic and useless. He said, NBA Twitter is the furthest you can get from our real fan base. Twitter is the absolute worst platform to try and engage with fans. Only thing worse than NBA Twitter is like Bitcoin Maxis, which I guess is a platform that people talk about Bitcoin on, which sounds like a thing I do not want to be part of. But
I guess I'm old, I guess, if I don't know what that is.
Can I tell you what I think he meant by this?
Bitcoin?
This whole thing about bringing up specifically NBA Twitter, calling it toxic and useless, talking about how it's not our real fan base and bringing that up.
Show me the lot. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, guys. Just kidding.
What was the conversation you and I had yesterday, that national media had yesterday, that everybody on Mavs Twitter was talking about? Luka's weight.
Yeah.
We were all talking about Luka's weight. We were all talking about how it affected him and how he needed to get better, needed to get in shape. And okay, well, now he's whining way more than before. And just all of a sudden people are piling on Luka and all that. In comes Mark Cuban with the distraction of the year to talk about, okay, let me think of something to come in here and just say that all of a sudden Mavs Twitter will forget everything about Luka and get over that conversation. The news cycle will move on, and I'll just come in and honestly use a Trump tactic and say something completely different so that everyone gets hooked on that. And what does Mavs Twitter care about more than anything else? We're both on it. We understand this. Mavs Twitter cares about themselves and cares about that. And so when Mark Cuban says it's toxic and useless, furthest from the fan base, the worst platform to engage on, all of a sudden he gave all these people a lot to work with.
What?
And he got ratioed for that last one on Twitter.
Are you discrediting me?
Even I came in and was like, I don't know, man. Twitter is maybe the best platform to talk about, because I've been in lots of Reddit conversations and Facebook conversations and some YouTube comments on highlight videos and things, and not our YouTube comments. Obviously, our YouTube comments are the best, but
incredible.
Instagram comments are always like not about the post that it's about, not about any. It's like, oh, LeBron is better than Jordan. I'm like, okay, well, this is a post about a Moses Brown dunk. I don't understand what this is
like.
About. And yeah, so, but I think Mark Cuban used all of this as a distraction, and I think it worked.
Clever. No, you said that, tonight. I was like, it's a good point. I mean, honestly, I could believe that. I mean, deep down, we won't know whether that's true or not, but it's like, I mean, it achieved it. I think people are going to still talk about it. I mean, I honestly think a lot of what he said about Twitter in general, NBA Twitter, he used the hashtag too, NBA Twitter.
Oh, right. Twice. He used it 3 times.
Yeah, I honestly think a lot of it is true. I agree with it. The only thing I don't agree with is it's useless. I don't think it's useless. I think it's kind of useless for a guy to his platform. But I mean, even for like some of guys like us, like our pod probably wouldn't be what it is if we didn't get to promote it and interact with a lot of people on Twitter. Now, have I found that Twitter has become more and more toxic over the years? Yeah, I think so.
The bigger a following you get, the more hate you get and stuff like that. You have to
for sure.
Yeah. So I don't want to have a whole conversation about is Twitter good, is Twitter not.
Well, I just think internet as a whole, I think people want to come at Cuban on that of like, oh, you just don't even want to, like, you're mute fans, you don't have talk with fans, all that stuff. I think there's a healthy balance of that because the portion of internet, Reddit, Twitter, anything, it lacks accountability at times because so many people can just put a cartoon and they're, not even their name, there's no accountability for it. So,
and the irony about that is that what Mavs fans are saying right now in Kirk's group therapy, we check in there every once in a while just to see what people are saying, and they're all saying that Cuban doesn't get held accountable and that they should hold Cuban accountable. And so Cuban's like, well, we hate Mavs Twitter because you can't hold anybody accountable. And then all of a sudden, it's the same going back and forth. Like both sides are pointing at each other saying, well, you can't be held accountable because you can say whatever you want with anonymity because you're on Twitter. And then they're like, well, you're the owner and who's going to hold you accountable? And you need to be held accountable for this awful trash roster and all that.
It is something to remember too, that whatever social bubble that you're in, there's been so many people that have DM'd us over the years trying to get in contact with us. And we're like, hey, Twitter's the best way to do it. And it's like, or they're email us and like, all right, we'll create a Twitter just to talk to you guys. There's somebody who came up to us at the game the other night.
Like probably honestly, like 50 people over the last.
Yeah. And it's like a guy came up to us a game on, against the Nets on Tuesday night, took a picture with us and said, dude, he tweeted us, I haven't been on Twitter in 6 years. So it's just a reminder of whatever social platform that you're on. It's a portion of the fan base. Mavs Twitter is a portion of the fan base. There's a whole group of Mavs fans that are not even on Mavs Twitter. So I get trapped in this too of Instagram saying this or Mavs or Twitter is saying this or whatever it is. And it's like, it's just a reminder to us that, hey, these are portions of fan base. It's not the entire fan base.
And it's weird because in all the things Cuban said, like, I think the Twitter things he said was just a distraction to get everybody to stop talking about Luka and Luka's weight. The 3-point shooting stuff, I don't know. Do I agree with it? Sure. Do I think it's the only problem? No. But did he say that? No, he also didn't say that either. So I know people are coming down hard on our Mark Cuban today, but I kind of agree. I kind of agree with what he said.
If he used it to take away from Luka, then brilliant move. Because then
just the Twitter stuff, the 3-point stuff, I think he actually believes and wanted to. Maybe that's to take away from some of the hate that Reggie Bullock and Tim Hardaway Jr. and guys were getting.
Yeah, and even he said on there in response to somebody's tweet about him and Bob, he's like, dude, we talk crap to each other all the time. So I think it's off-putting to some people, like lower people like us, because it's kind of like the Kevin Durant stuff. In a way, you're like, well, why are you engaging, and saying all this stuff? You don't have to do that. But I understand when Kevin Durant says too, well, why can't I? I'm a human being too. Like, why are you putting rules on me that I can't? And I'm like, touche. Like, I can't. Like, it may, so to each his own. Like, it was entertaining at least. It had me on Twitter more today than I've tried to stay off of it, during the days a lot now. And I was on it more today than I have in a week.
If he came on and started saying stuff about, well, the centers are great and the Mavericks defense is this, Jason Kidd's doing a great job and like all that kind of stuff, I'd be more skeptical. But he only's focused on just the 3-point shooting, which it's down. The numbers say it, so it is what it is.
Yeah.
The trades we've made have been perfect. Like if he started to say all that kind of stuff, I'd be like,
that's different.
I don't know about that one.
The logic about the balls, though, my only issue with that is, when it seems like he's trying to take up for the Mavs sucking at shooting the basketball. It's like, oh, the ball's the ball. And it's like, and it goes back to the point I was saying. It's like, all right, yeah, they have sucked at shooting, but like the whole league sucked at shooting. You can't just point at the league. Well, the whole league sucked at shooting too. It's like, okay, yeah, but you're the worst of the worst, one of the worst teams. So
it's not the only reason for sure.
No, I think it's a collection of reasons, and everybody's just going to argue in a circle for why they think the shooting's down. It's part of it.